from Playmates.
This is it, my favorite wave of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figures, the 1990 lineup. You know, this was the year. We had the movie, this had just come out and blown our minds. We were playing the video games, we had all these action figures to play with, looking better than they ever did, we were eating turtle pies. It was the time to be a Turtles fan. And just the work that went into this line is just so impressive, and it's so iconic. When I think of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from my childhood, this wave of figures is pretty much the first thing that comes to mind. Like those bright fluorescent colors that just stand out so much, that neon glow that everything has, the crazy demented character designs, the incredible sculpts that we have going on in some of these, like amazing works of art, these sculpts. Just so much more impressive than the figures that came before it. This is, for me, the wave that truly defines what the early 90s Turtle Mania was all about. Now I can't wait to dive in and start talking about these figures. These things are so near and dear to my heart. Like, I love these things. Even if not all of them are spectacular, like, it was just the greatest wave altogether. But there's some things that are worth noting before jumping in. For one, this is the point where it really got blurred who was a villain and who was a hero. So you had, like, the TV show running, you had the action figure line, you had the Archie comics, you had the Mirage comics, and so many times they'd all have completely different stories and designs for these characters. So it was kind of weird. It's like none of them collaborated. You'd think at least the toy line and the cartoon show would have collaborated more, since they were supposed to be cross-promoting each other. But they didn't really seem to, because the characters are just all over the place. So forgive me if I put characters that you think are villains clumped with the heroes and vice versa, because I'm just going by ultimately how I think of the character, based on most of their appearances. I also want to say before diving in that this applies to my past two videos too, though I failed to mention it, that there's time codes for each individual figure and my ranking of the figures down in the description below. I think that's worth noting because these videos always end up so long, and I don't expect anybody to sit through the entire thing, most likely. Well, now with all that out of the way, let's dive in and start talking about the greatest Turtles figures ever made. And I'm going to kick things off with one of my favorite characters as a kid, Mondo Gecko. He's still awesome, but I don't rank him as high in my favorite characters list as I used to, I think. But he's awesome, and he's a total classic. I think everyone who collected this line as a kid remembers this character fondly. Mondo Gecko was introduced as like a best friend for Michelangelo. They were like best buddies, you know, same brainwaves, skater dudes, basically, you know, like Bill and Ted. But unfortunately, they never used much Mondo Gecko. Like, we got this explanation, like, oh, you know, he's Mike's best friend, and they're always hanging out, and they're inseparable. It's like, well, they're pretty separable, actually, because we only see Mondo Gecko hanging out with Mike a few times. Now, he's actually kind of a unique figure because as far as unique character figures go, he's really the only one I can think of offhand that does not come with any sort of weapon. He only has the skateboard. And, well, he comes with decals that you can put on the skateboard and on his shirt and kind of dress him up in all kinds of cool punk designs. Mondo Gecko was like the epitome of everything cool at that time. You know, skateboarding, bright neon colors, everything about him. Like, he was just awesome. The decals were a little odd. I mean, it's a cool idea. It was definitely something I found awesome as a kid. That you could, like, you know, everyone could do a custom Mondo Gecko. Like, when you find Mondo Geckos for sale on eBay or at garage sales or at conventions, if it's an open Mondo Gecko, like not sealed anymore, chances are it's going to technically be a completely unique Mondo Gecko figure because everyone applied the stickers differently. You could really put whatever stickers you wanted wherever you wanted to. But the problem with the stickers, though, is that sometimes when you were a kid, you might have put it on a part of his body that was a little bumpy or whatever, then it just starts to kind of peel off because it's not a flat surface for it to stick to. So a lot of Mondo Geckos have damaged stickers at this point. And I think a lot of figures that do have stickers, like not even just Turtles, think from all retro toy lines. Anytime they use those stickers that you were supposed to apply yourself, it's really close to impossible to find those in good shape these days, unless they just are brand new and have never been applied to the figures. Mondo Gecko is one of those characters that I was super excited to see in the cartoon show after getting the figure, because the figure was so awesome. Like, me and my brother loved Mondo Gecko, and I just got really hyped to see him in the cartoon. I remember seeing the cartoon as a kid, but it's one of those weird moments where I remember the episode being totally different from how it actually went. There were things that were the same, like, you know, that the gecko happened to be in the sewer at the same time that the turtles were. So when the mutagen fell on them, it fell on the gecko as well. So he was almost like a brother to the turtles in a way. That was true. Also, the thing about him being disguised, you know, like he was undercover as like a human. He was kind of a bad guy at first. That was right, but like so much of it was different. Where I remember the episode being a two-parter, where one week it ended where he revealed that the guy under the trench coat was actually Mondo Gecko and that he wasn't a human, that he was actually a lizard and everything. And then the next week, it was like Mike fighting Mondo Gecko and then them teaming up because they have to stop the real bad guy. That's how I remember it going when I was a kid. A two-part thing separated by a week. But it's actually not. It's just one episode. It all happens very fast. There's really not a whole lot of mystery. He kind of instantly just gets revealed to be Mondo Gecko. Like, I don't know if it just seemed so much longer and more epic to me as a kid that I thought it was like this long time before we realized that that guy was Mondo Gecko, but it's like it happens right away. I think the origin story for him in the Archie comics was actually better than the one they used in the cartoon. It was kind of a sad one because, you know, he had to rescue his girlfriend, but when he finally did and she saw him as the gecko, she didn't love him anymore. But it was a good origin story. It was like a little bit of like a little tiny fun adventure, almost like Double Dragon story or something, but I think it was better than the one we got in the cartoon show. The cartoon show one was kind of weird. The figure always did have some cool details on it, though. I like the fact that he has like a roller skate tied to his tail. That was always a little fun addition. I like the fact that his skateboard has a motor on it. I mean, that wouldn't actually work because that would be so heavy. That skateboard would just be doing a permanent wheelie, but it's awesome. And I also like the fact that you actually can always dip the figure back, and because of the engine built onto the back of it, the figure actually stands like he's kind of jumping off a ramp or something. So you get this kind of awesome action pose very easily with Mondo Gecko. Something worth mentioning is that there are variants to Mondo Gecko that are out there where he has, you know, blue eyelids. The whole top half of his head is blue, and he has black pupils in his eyes. I never had that version of the figure. When I was a kid, I had one that looked like this, and now I have this one where his eyes are all red and he only has blue little lids on top of his eyes. The whole brow isn't blue like it is in the other figure. So this is kind of like the cheap budget version of the figure. It's like the crappy one they didn't care about. So I guess I always got the cheap budget one. I never saw the non-budget one, the fully painted one, in stores as a kid. I only saw it on the back of the package and figured it was just some promotional BS shot, because they always did that in the back, that the promo figures never looked anything like the actual figure. There was so much more painted detail on them. But later on the internet, I learned that there were Mondo Geckos that were fully painted and detailed. So kind of stinks that I've never found one. Maybe I'll pick one up someday, but just worth noting that all my photos are going to be of Mondo with the lesser paint job. I always thought it was funny, though, that somehow he's sticking his tongue out and clenching his teeth at the same time. Like, that's gotta hurt your tongue. I also like the braces. That was a fun touch to make him look a little more like a teenager. Yeah, all in all, really fun figure. Mondo Gecko is awesome. Probably the weirdest thing about the character Mondo Gecko for me when I was a kid was me and my brother, like I said, we thought he was awesome. And for some reason, when we would go to the local supermarket, Pathmark, there was all these like coupon dispensers in aisles, these little red pieces of plastic that would stick off of the shelves. And when you put your hand there, it would print out a coupon. Me and my brother, like little jerks, used to just, we didn't realize we were being jerks, but we used to try to collect as many of those coupons as we could. So we'd just get a bunch of them out of the machines. And I guess other people were missing out on getting the actual coupons they were going to use then. But we used to always call it Mondo money for some reason. I don't know why, but the coupons were supposed to be Mondo Gecko related somehow. This was Mondo money. And every time we'd be like in the car driving home from the supermarket, we would like count up how much Mondo money we had. But it was like, there was no logic to it. It was like, say if it was a juice box or something, it would only be like $2 or something. But if it was like a gallon jug of something, then we'd say it was like $10. Like it was just, it's just a weird thing we did as kids. And for some reason that was somehow Mondo Gecko related. Also when the drink Mondo came out, remember that? It was like Squeeze It, or like those Kool-Aid bottles, Mondo. Yeah, it used to remind me of Mondo Gecko. And the Gecko t-shirts. There was a clothes brand called Gecko. It all somehow came back to Mondo Gecko in my head as a kid. Mondo Gecko was like a franchise in my mind as a child. But yeah, awesome character, awesome figure. Totally classic. Next, we're going to talk about Ray Fillet. Ray Fillet is a pretty iconic Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles character. He's not one that's brought back often, but back in the day, he was a pretty big deal. You know, everyone knew his action figure. He actually appeared in the cartoon before all the other characters from this wave appeared in the cartoon. And he also was very popular in the Archie comics. But in modern times, they've really never brought him back much. He's kind of faded from existence, which kind of stings because he's a cool character. There's actually two variants to his figure. I only have the purple suited one, you know, his wetsuit that he's wearing. You can get like one that's like, not quite purple, I guess it's like maroon, this sort of color here. But then there's also one where it's yellow and this big sort of V design in the middle is like a turquoise kind of color, or a teal. But the cool thing about the Ray Fillet figure is it's actually made to be played with in the water because it has an action feature with the water. When you bring him underwater or just run water on top of the figure, his suit will actually change color. There have actually been times in my life, honestly, where the AC was off or broken or whatever on extremely hot and humid days, and it would get so disgustingly humid in my room that his shirt would actually start changing color. That's gross. I always really liked this sort of neon vermilion color of his weapons and his belt. But I do have to say, it's kind of weird that his sidekick character, Fish Sticks, is like a suicide bomber. Like, if you actually look at him, he's strapped to the gills with explosives, and he's got this crazy look on his face as he's ready to press down the trigger and blow himself up. Like, I know we gotta stop the Foot Clan Man, but that's a little extreme. I feel like this character would never get made today. Like, a toy today would not get packed in with a suicide bomber. Ray Fillet's color scheme is really cool. I just like it. He has a very cool, like, summer ocean kind of look to him. Like, you look at this figure and it just reminds you of summer vacation as a kid. The only flaw I've really noticed with Ray Fillet is debatable, but from my experience, I've seen that I think because he was played with in the water so much, you know, he was in the pool a lot and chlorine and whatever, the inner skeleton that holds the figure together just seems to get brittle, and it can make his joints break. Like, his legs can snap off a bit more easily than other figures. I'm not sure if this is because of him being played with in the water, but I think it could be. What's very bizarre is how drastically different his cartoon appearance is from the figure. Like, usually they look different in the cartoon in earlier waves. After a while, by the time you got the ground chuck and dirtbag and all, they look exactly the same in the cartoon. But early on, usually they looked pretty different in the cartoon. But Ray Fillet is like, he's a totally different character. Not only is he a villain in the cartoon, which is weird, because he's a hero for the toy line and the Archie comics, but he doesn't even look like a manta ray anymore. He has like a regular fish head. He's just like a guppy or something. Like, I don't know what he is. And they don't even call him Ray Fillet. They just call him Ray. And he was made by a mad scientist. And he has this weird, like, Chicago accent. It's really weird. It's not at all what I was picturing for Ray Fillet. And he's naked too. He's like just wearing a Speedo. What a horrible character to call Ray. And what a horrible way to promote the action figure and vice versa. Like, worst cross promotion ever. Here it is, the crown masterpiece of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles toy line, Muckman and Joe Eyeball. While they aren't my #1 favorite characters in the line, this is the greatest action figure they ever sculpted. This thing is just breathtaking. You can look at details on this guy for like an hour. There's just so much care and work that went into crafting this figure. There's so much crazy stuff on here. There's like a frog on him. There's a teddy bear. There's a manhole cover for one of his feet. His nose is a clothespin. He's got a banana peel on his head. Just all within him, you see all these crazy bottles and everything. There's all this insane detail. There's almost no inch of this figure that is not a different item. You almost never see a figure with this much detail put into it. And he just looks awesome. The paint job is awesome. The color scheme is awesome. The fact you can plug the trash can into his back and then put Joe Eyeball in the trash can is just a lot of fun. He had a really cool action feature too. The problem is, this required you to buy slime of some sort. Now, most toy lines will put out their own version of slime, starting, with Mattel was probably the first famous one to do that. While slime toys existed before Masters of the Universe, Mattel's Motu line was really the one that made slime popular with action figures. But it actually makes a lot more sense with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as the ooze is a big part of the lore of the series. But I was never allowed to get the slime when I was a kid, the mutagen, if you want to call it. My mom would never let me get it. She said it would stain the house and it would ruin everything. And I mean, looking back on it, I totally agree with her. I understand where she was coming from. We wrecked the house enough as kids. The last thing we needed was this slimy garbage to just get caught in the carpet and stain the walls and everything. But the action feature was you put some in the garbage can on his back and you put some in the top of his head, because you can lift the crown of his head up. It's like a piece of cabbage or something. And you can put some in his head. And when you press the lid to his head down, and when you press Joe Eyeball into his trash can, then the ooze will start pouring out of his mouth and out of the openings. So it will really add to the look of him. He's already a pile of slime and garbage. Now he'll have actual slime running down his body, which will really add to the look, and it's pretty awesome. You can actually also put it into his gun. He comes with this giant gun made out of like PVC pipe, and you can just put some ooze in there and it will kind of spill out the front if you tilt it forward a little bit. But for me, the main attraction for this figure was just the amazing sculpt and the crazy amount of detail in it. I remember when I first got this guy, well, my brother got him, but when we first got him, we both just kind of sat down in the corner of our room and just looked over every inch of him. And we just pointed out like, oh, there's this right here and there's this there. And we must have done it for like half an hour just looking at this figure and trying to figure out what all the little details are. It's really fun. I mean, heck, this guy's so detailed, you could probably play an I Spy game with him. Like, say an item and then make someone find it on Muckman. He's a figure I feel I didn't appreciate as much as a kid though. Even though I did really enjoy looking at the details on him, he wasn't my favorite character by far. I was much more into the animal characters as a kid, but honestly, as I've gotten older, I've grown a much bigger respect for him, and he is one of my favorite Turtles characters, probably. I've heard also, not sure if it's true, that he's a tribute to the Toxic Avenger, Toxie, from Trauma. And if that is true, I totally see the inspiration here. Playmates also actually did the Toxic Crusaders toy line, and their Toxie figure was awesome, and I had that as a little kid, but that's getting onto a whole nother topic. Muckman and Joe Eyeball, the greatest figure in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles line. Panda Khan. This guy. I never cared about this guy. And he was actually my action figure as a kid. I got him for Christmas one year. I just find him boring and redundant. We already had Usagi Yojimbo, who was a samurai version of an animal. We already had Leo the Soar Samurai. Why do we need another character that has nothing interesting about him other than he's a samurai? And on top of that, they already named a character after Genghis Khan. We have Genghis Frog. Really, Panda Khan? That doesn't even sound clever. Genghis Frog was more clever than Panda Khan. I don't get it. Like, why would you name two characters after the same historical figure, like a year apart? It just seems weird. Also, I don't have any of his accessories, but he came with like an axe and a pistol. What kind of samurai used a pistol? It's so weird. Anyway, just to let you know how boring I find this character, I actually completely forgot about him when recording this video. I had to go back later on and add him in, because I totally forgot to do him when I was doing the heroes. It wasn't until I was about halfway through with the villains that I realized, oh wait, I forgot Panda Khan. Another thing I just find boring about this character is he's another one of those cases where they really do nothing with the animal side of the character. Like, as I've said, sometimes they go a little too far with the animal side of them, and you get stuff like Splinter where he just looks like a big fat rat. But then you have those cases where it's really just a human with inhuman skin color and an animal face. And Panda Khan just has like generic built human man body with a very plain, unmemorable panda head. I don't know, I don't find Panda Khan to be an interesting character. Of every original character they made figures of in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles vintage line, he might be my least favorite because he's just so boring. There's like maybe one other figure who's a contender. Now that's just the characters though. Like I still think Leatherhead has a crappier figure than Panda Khan, but I still like that figure better because I just like the character so much more. Panda Khan to me is like the boringest character. I don't even know why he got made. There's probably way more interesting mutant ideas they could have made figures for before making Panda Khan, and they made Panda Khan. I don't even think he ever appeared in any other type of media. I don't think he was ever in a comic. I know he was never in a cartoon show. All right, let's stop things. Let me address this. Not that anybody's gonna watch this video, but if they do, and I get a storm of comments telling me what a moron I am, I gotta clear things up. See, from when I was a little kid, all the way to when I recorded the dialogue for this video, I had no idea who Panda Khan was. I just thought he was some lame idea that they came up with. But in the time between recording this and editing this video, I finally realized that Panda Khan is another Usagi Yojimbo deal, and he's from his own franchise, and it was like this big collaboration crossover thing where the Turtles met Panda Khan in the comics, and then they made an action figure for him. And I realized that Panda Khan is not the character's name, just like Usagi Yojimbo is not named Usagi Yojimbo. It's a title. His real name is Lee Yang. He's had a long-running franchise, and no one's really known about it outside of the Turtles toy, myself included. I thought the toy was boring, so I never even thought of Googling him. If I had just Googled him, I would have instantly learned all of this years ago. Yeah, he's part of his own franchise, lives in his own world with anthropomorphic animal people, and apparently they're coming back. Apparently they're making a new comic book for him soon and a new animated show for him soon. So Panda Khan's going to be bigger than ever soon, I guess. I have a little more respect for the character after reading all of that and learning there's more to him, but I still just think he was a pretty boring character for the toy line. Supposedly there was even more crossovers with anthropomorphic characters than I knew about. I knew about the crossover with, Savage Dragon and Usagi Yojimbo, but I didn't know about Panda Khan, and apparently the Cowboys of Moo Mesa crossed over in the comics at some point. That is so weird. I never knew about this stuff, especially since it was years after the Moo Mesa show was off the air. But just to cover my ass, I figured I'd put this in the video, so there you go. I know now. The one person who watches this video doesn't have to tell me that. There's like Archie characters you could have actually made. We never got an Armagon figure. We never got a figure for the Chameleon. We could have even gotten, if you want to do a bear, do Tora, the polar bear guy who was dressed like the Terminator from the arcade game on NES. I'd be fine with that. That'd be awesome. Panda Khan, I can't even tell you anything else about him. He's just Panda Khan. I don't know. No memories, no thoughts. Napoleon Bonafrog, the only other one of the Punk Frogs to get an action figure. And as you can see, they took artistic liberties with this one. And to be honest, I'm glad they did. I think that's a leaf frog is the type of frog that they based him on. It's so much more interesting than just getting another figure that looks exactly like Genghis Frog. I actually kind of wish they did this with all four of the frogs. Like, maybe one could be a red-eyed tree frog, and one of them could be like a big fat frog or something. It would have been interesting to get different types of frogs. But I like that they did that. Even though he doesn't look a whole lot like a frog, he looks more like a dinosaur or something. But regardless, Napoleon is a good way to see the jump from 80s to 90s toys. So you look at Genghis Frog, and that color scheme is like very 80s toy. Bright colors, a lot of magentas and stuff. But then you look at Napoleon, and it's so bright, it's fluorescent as hell. Super neon, neon green, neon yellow, hot pink. Almost a similar color scheme to Genghis Frog with the yellow and pink shorts, but the shirt is green rather than blue. But just so neon, and then just the fact that he's so extreme. He's got all these warts and stuff all over him, all these spikes and stuff, and he's just his face looks so crazy. He's got these huge teeth and these bulging eyes. You just really see how much more extreme and more expressive and vibrant these figures got in the new wave. There was actually about 2 different bunches of Napoleon figures, paint variants kind of. Very, very subtle, but some of them, his skin is an all-out sort of brown, sort of pale beige color, little greenish, a little like grayed and greenish. But then there's some that were released that were very greenish, like far more greenish than the one I own. And it was less of that dusty color and more like a grayish sort of greenish color with a little bit of brown. But everyone I've always owned has been this more brownish kind of dust color. My main memory of this guy is losing most of his accessories very early on, but most importantly, losing his leg very early on. I think it was the week I got him, possibly even the day I got him, that I ended up somehow losing one of his legs in a bush outside of my house. On our back patio, there was a big round bush. And we were playing with the figure. We might have been doing something where like you had to find all the pieces of him and put him back together or something. Like we took the 2 legs off and then hid the body somewhere and hid the legs in different places. I don't know what we were doing. That's just a hunch. I don't remember. For some reason, his leg had to come off when we were playing. But it ended up in this bush, which was just on the patio. It's not like it was in a ton of greenery or anything. Like just bushes and bushes. Just a solitary bush on the patio. But for some reason, we could not find that leg. Like for the life of us, we could not find that leg. We searched all through that bush and couldn't find it. It wasn't until years later that we actually found that leg, and it was just laying under the bush, like behind it. By that point, I don't even think I had my Ninja Turtles anymore. So that was always a bizarre thing that happened with Napoleon, and really the thing I remember most about the figure from my childhood. It's a shame I lost his leg, because I actually thought this figure looked really cool as a kid when I first got him. I got him in summer, and like Angus and Ray Fillet, I think that's suitable because he is a very summery looking figure. He really brings back memories of, playing in my backyard when it's sweaty and hot outside. Awesome times. The Fugitoid is a figure I got for Christmas one year, and I thought he was cool, but for some reason I just wasn't ever really super into the Fugitoid. I wasn't a big robot kid, admittedly. Like, I had a couple mini Transformers toys, or they were like knockoffs, I don't even think they were official. And I had a Transformers sleeping bag as a kid, but I really never watched Transformers. Like, I wasn't a big Transformers fan. I didn't even know about Voltron when I was a little kid. I didn't know about GoBots or Mighty Orbots, which is actually an awesome cartoon. I didn't know about any of that stuff really as a kid. I wasn't really into robots. I didn't really start thinking robots were cool until probably when I got into Mega Man, which I admittedly didn't play on the NES. It was one of those series I just happened to not get my hands on during my whole NES life as a kid. And I was introduced with Mega Man X on the Super Nintendo and then went back and played all the Mega Man games afterwards. But anyway, I was not a big robot guy. And Fugitoid I found to be like kind of boring. I liked the goldish, copperish color scheme, and I definitely thought he was a fun toy. I never really got what the whole chest opening mechanic was. It doesn't really seem to serve a purpose. But I like that he has these pegs all over him that you can plug his weapons into. And he almost has the ability to plug weapons into each other to make larger weapons. I don't know if it was intentional, but it works and it's pretty cool. But of this set, I always thought Fugitoid was kind of boring. Which is a shame because Fugitoid's a major Turtles character. In fact, he predates the Turtles. Eastman and Laird invented the Fugitoid, Professor Honeycutt, and then when they made Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that was their way of using the character. They put him into Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But yeah, he's the one character who seems to be in some form or another relevant in every form of the Turtles at some point, which again is understandable since he's one of Eastman and Laird's original ideas. But I still just never get super excited about Fugitoid merchandise or anything. Not saying I hate the guy, he's cool. And this is probably the coolest piece of merch he ever got, I think. But he's not my favorite Turtles character. Admittedly, he's really not. I always found it weird that his feet are slightly translucent if you actually look at it. They're made of like a translucent plastic. It's just so thick and the color on it is so rich that it's hard to even notice. I don't even know if you can tell on the camera. But my memories of having Fugitoid as a kid were very short-lived because pretty early on, probably a few weeks or months after I got the figure. Pathmark alert. Pathmark coming up again. For some reason, this is like my third time mentioning the supermarket Pathmark on these reviews. I don't know why it keeps coming up. I guess it was a huge part of my childhood. But I was in Pathmark with my mom once, and I was there with my brother, and we were playing by the candy machine, the gumball machine. Where you put in your coin, you turn the little lever, and out pops a little capsule with a crappy toy in it, or a piece of candy, or whatever. And I was opening the little door to the tray that the items fall out in, and I was putting Fugitoid in that, kind of seeing like how deep I could stuff him in there. Because for whatever reason, I brought Fugitoid to the supermarket. I don't know why I did, but I was playing with him the whole time. And I guess we got distracted, and we walked out and drove home, and it wasn't until we were in the car driving home, I think, or by the time we got back to the house that I realized, oh crap, I don't have Fugitoid anymore. So Fugitoid ended up staying in that gumball machine. But hey, some kid probably saw it sticking out, grabbed that, and that might have even become their favorite action figure. They got some free Fugitoid toy and might have made their night. That's sort of the silver lining in me being stupid and losing my Fugitoid as a kid. I never got him back. He was never a figure that I, got another copy of later on. Once he was gone, he was gone. But, I do remember playing with him a good deal and looking at the figure a good deal before losing it. So, I still had a good time with Fugitoid. Alright, I'm going to sort of use Wingnut and Screwloose as a way to bridge the gap between the heroes and villains, because in the cartoon show, Wingnut and Screwloose are 100% villains. They're like evil aliens, which is really weird. I don't know. But for the toy line and most of their other appearances, they're heroes. And I think that's fairly obvious, judging by the fact that Wingnut himself is an obvious homage to Batman, where he's more of a man-bat. More specifically, Silver Age Batman, I'd say. Like, clearly Adam West kind of Batman. He's kind of a comedic take on him. Because, right down to the gray bodysuit and the blue cowl and the bright yellow utility belt with a bat emblem right on the front of it. He's got all these little gadgets on him that are all bat themed. But it's hard to say, because it seems like they never knew if they wanted Wingnut and Screwloose to be heroes or villains. They sort of jumped back and forth. Honestly, Muckman and Joe Eyeball were the same way, where they were really heroes. They're only adversaries of the Turtles for a brief moment in the cartoon, and then they become friends. And for some reason in the toy line, they continually called Muckman and Joe Eyeball bad guys. Yet, Wingnut and Screwloose were considered heroes. Sort of like how Metalhead, they kept jumping back and forth between calling him a hero and calling him a villain. It's just weird. They couldn't keep track of their own characters. But Wingnut and Screwloose being bad guys kind of makes sense to me because, they're both blood-sucking flying animals. That was like their whole reason for pairing them up, a vampire bat and a mosquito. And you don't really think of bloodsuckers as being heroes very often. So it was an odd choice, but they're supposed to be superheroes. It's also odd that Wingnut is dressed like a superhero. Meanwhile, Screwloose is just wearing like a sleeveless shirt and sweatpants. Like he's just dressed like a bum. It's weird. But regardless, Screwloose is actually supposed to be the brains of the operation, and Wingnut is supposed to be a moron. He's the muscle, but he's stupid, whereas Screwloose is the one who does all their thinking and scheming and everything. As I've said before, I've always had a personal pet peeve. Not saying it's a mark of a good or bad figure. It's just a personal preference of mine. I've always had an obsession with figures being able to somehow carry every accessory they come with. Now, if it's like a companion character or like a boombox or something, I'm okay with it being on the floor at their feet next to them. But as far as like guns and swords and staffs and bombs and everything are concerned, I always like to have the figure to be able to be displayed with all of them properly on the figure. And Wingnut is a dream come true because his wings, which hilariously enough, if you actually look at them, are mechanical extensions for his wings. His real wings are these itty bitty little things, which would never be able to carry such a hefty bat. But his big mechanical extensions have all these little pegs on them, so you can store all of his weapons on him, which is just awesome. I love that. To be honest, I've rarely ever even put the weapons in Wingnut's hands because It's just so much more convenient to just put them on the wings. They also always showed on the back of the packaging and everything that Screwloose is meant to stand on his shoulders, and that is done easily sometimes, but there's a weird sort of spot you gotta get it in where the leg rests on one shoulder and the tail rests on the other. Wingnut just has a really cool, really loose kind of like fluid sculpt. He doesn't seem as restricted as some other characters. He's very expressive. He's just very animated. You know, like he's pointing forward and everything. They didn't think about articulation first. They thought about just making an awesome sculpt first. And I think that actually worked in Wingnut's case, especially since his wings are articulated. So he has some extra articulation that some other figures don't, to make up for the lack of being able to hold more than one weapon in his hands at a time, as he has the one pointing finger and everything. Another one of these crazy missing figure mysteries happened with Wingnut and Screwloose when I was a child. As I've said, my original Leonardo just somehow magically crossed over into the space between dimensions when we threw him at a glass door when we were kids. My Leatherhead figure that I got in Ocean City, Maryland was MIA in the pool of the hotel we were staying at. Obviously some kid probably found him and just ended up keeping it. And, you know, my Fugitoid I just mentioned got left in a gumball machine. Well, this one's one of the more mysterious ones, like Leonardo. In this case, we were going away on vacation to Vermont. We would go, my whole life when I was a little kid, we went every July to my grandparents' place in Vermont. Beautiful place, love it, tons of childhood memories, great time. But this is when we were really young, and this was before we were told we could bring all of our Turtles toys with us. Eventually we got like a black duffel bag that we just stored all of our turtle toys and accessories in, and we could just take that to Vermont when we'd go and visit, and we could just play with all of them in our grandparents' house all summer. Well, not all summer, we were only there for about a week or two, but before that, this was probably the one time before that we went and we didn't bring the bag. My brother and I were playing with all of our Turtles figures. We were like setting them up in like a display on top of our dresser, and we were like putting them all in specific poses, making it look like they were battling and stuff. And I remember we took some of the figures with us. The other ones we left there. We left Screwloose dead center up front right on the dresser. He was just standing on the dresser. We went to Vermont for about a week, 2 weeks, and we came back. All the figures were still standing there, except Screwloose. He was just gone, and we never saw him again, and I have no idea what happened to him. He just up and vanished. He flew away, I guess. I don't know. That was the end of Screwloose, and I have no idea what happened to him. How the other figures were fine. Can you imagine someone breaking into someone's house, not to steal the jewelry, not to steal the silverware, not to steal the money, not to steal their clothes, not even to steal all of their toys, just to get Screwloose? Now, obviously, I know it didn't happen, but, I mean, maybe some crazy Screwloose fan saw me and my brother playing with him one time and was like, next time they leave that house, that thing is mine. When I was rebuying the figures in 2006, when I was getting really back into Turtles, you know, I was having massive nostalgia for the Turtle Mania years. I bought back Wingnut and Screwloose, all the accessories. And as I said at the time, my brother did something one night where he took black Sharpie and white out and thought he was correcting the unpainted parts of toys. So he painted the tank top on Screwloose white, he painted his teeth white, he painted his eyes white, he colored in his pupils with black, and he colored his shoes black. Oh, and the wings on the back of him were white as well. And he was like that for years, honestly. And then just in the past year, I wanted to finally get a clean, normal Screwloose again. So I'm like, you know, let me wash off all this stuff. And as I've said in another video, surprisingly enough, toothpaste does a pretty good job. But there was just so much of this caked on the Screwloose that it just wouldn't all come off. And I still have it, but it looks atrocious. If there's a better way to do it and I learn about some time, you can just soak it in something, I'll do it and I'll have 2 Screwlooses, because I eventually just ended up buying a clean one. Because even though it is kind of cool to have him where his eyes and his mouth actually pop out and he actually looks like a character, I'd still like to have my figures stock. I mean, he did admittedly look pretty good with his face showing before I washed them full of toothpaste. But like I said, the stock way is the way I want it. I'm not into like getting finite collectibles and messing them up, like just painting all over them and stuff, especially not with whiteout. Now we're going to get into the characters who are undeniably villains. And we're going to start with my favorite villain from the wave. One of my favorite villains in all of Ninja Turtles. Debatably the coolest, most badass looking figure in the entire line. Slash. Now, as I said before, I'm not a terribly huge fan of dark versions of the main protagonist in franchises. It's just an easy go-to route that people do all the time. There's always just, that robotic version of the main character or dark shadow version of them, the evil twin. They're, biologically created by the villain, or the hero's dark half somehow gets pulled out of them and becomes its own entity or whatever. I just find that it's the most overdone trope of all time. Like, it's so overdone. And to be fair, Slash is no exception. He is just a dark version of the Turtles. Again, like Metalhead, he isn't a direct dark counterpart to any one turtle, but he's sort of a culmination of all four of them. As you can see in the action figure, he even comes with barbaric variations on their weapons. But he has a very suitable, black bandana. He just has a really cool design. I mean, honestly, that's the main thing that just makes Slash an awesome character in my mind, regardless of the whole, negative hero counterpart thing that I'm not a fan of. Being fair, I'll admit, he's a pretty lame idea on paper, but I don't know, he's just so cool looking. He doesn't just look like Leonardo with different colored skin and different bandana and frowning eyes. Like, he's actually a totally different looking character, and he looks so menacing. That big bulging eye he has, those gums shown with those jagged teeth coming out, that bulky physique, that hunched back with that huge spike covered shell, the thorns on his elbows and knee pads. Just everything about him is so cool looking. One of the coolest looking Ninja Turtles figures ever made. And I remember getting this guy for my birthday one summer. I got him pretty early in the second wave, actually. I believe I got him before we got anybody else in the second wave, because I do believe he was released a little earlier than everyone else. I always thought of him as the first figure in the third wave. I hear some people think of him as the last figure in the second wave, but I believe officially I am right. Playmates considered him the first figure in the third wave. Like, they do that sometimes. Like, later on we got a few figures earlier than other ones. Like Anthrax was released before Scale Tail, but we'll get to that. But Slash is just so cool. But you want to talk characters who are just disappointing in the cartoon. Cartoon Slash is so disappointing. Like, he doesn't even look like the same character. He's not quite as much of a far cry as Ray Fillet was, but, I mean, he's not much better. It was very common back in the day where no one was on the same page. You'd have the action figure description of who the character was, you'd have the cartoon description of who the character was, and then you'd have the Archie comic or Mirage comic explanation of who the character was, and all three of them could be vastly different depending on the character. And Slash was one of those cases. When you read his profile on the back of the package, it says he's from Dimension X. He just, I guess, is a parallel dimension version of the Turtles. That's what their turtle is in their world, is this evil monster turtle. It says he absolutely hates pizza. He's like the opposite of the Turtles. He hates everything they love. But then in the cartoon, he's scarfing down pizzas like more than the Turtles ever did. He's just a pet snapping turtle that Bebop has, that Bebop hides from Shredder and everyone because he doesn't want anyone to know that he has a pet turtle because Shredder hates turtles so much. And when Bebop and Rocksteady are cleaning the Technodrome, yes, this actually happens, like Mutagen gets on him and he turns into a mutant turtle. And eventually he kind of rages and breaks out of the Technodrome after stealing a bunch of weapons that Shredder had. Like, he had like 2 katana blades on the wall, and Slash steals and runs out. And he's going after this thing. There's this little palm tree decoration that Bebop calls his binky. He calls it Slash's binky. And that's like how he would train the pet turtle, is like the turtle would always listen when he used the binky. It was like his favorite thing. But now the binky's been like lost, and Slash is just going on a rampage looking for a binky. It's such a weird story. And he's wearing all this weird mechanical crap. Like, he doesn't actually have the one bulging eye. He's just wearing a mechanical headband where one eye looks like a scope or something. Such a shame we didn't get him in the actual action figure design. And the Archie comics, his design was more slimmed down. He wasn't this cool, like, very bluish green like he is for the toy. He was like more of a murky, mossy green. And he was just like skinnier, not as hunched over. He was a little bit more like how the normal Turtles looked, which was not as cool as the action figure. Turtles in Time is probably the closest we got to him looking like the action figure in any source of media outside of Playmates toys. But even then, he's a little closer to the Archie design, which is really a shame because I feel like he has one of the most iconic designs. If you ask any Turtles fan what their favorite action figure was from the original line, I'd say a good 50% of them will say Slash. No joke. I know he had a variant later on where he didn't have the neon yellow belly anymore. He had a mustard colored belly like the rest of the Turtles. And I've actually seen that and had an opportunity to buy it. And I might pick it up someday. I'm not big on variants, honestly. I'd rather just collect the characters. But it is interesting. But I like the neon one much better. This color scheme right here, the magenta and the neon yellow and the bright bluish kind of green. Color schemes like this just really sum up that time of my life, that early childhood in the late 80s and the early 90s when fluorescent colors were the hot ticket. They were on everything. Everyone loved neon colors. Everything was just awesome. Everything was awesome. Good times. Next up is Mutagen Man. I actually forgot about this guy after my childhood. Like in the time between my childhood, when I had all the figures, to the point in late high school where I started to get nostalgic for them again, eventually leading to me buying them all back after high school. In that time, I kind of forgot who Mutagen Man was, and Scumbug as well, who we'll get to next. But once I saw them, like as soon as I saw the figures, I remembered them completely. I'm like, oh yeah, how did I forget about this guy? Mutagen Man was a cool idea. He's an awesome figure. He's an interesting figure though. He has an action feature. You're supposed to fill him up with water, and he comes with all these little pieces, almost like operation kind of pieces, like tiny wrenches and all this stuff. And you can see all these little mechanical pieces floating around in him. Maybe they were bones, not wrenches. I have no idea. But he also comes with this weird coating on his transparent body. It's sort of this soft rubber or plastic suit casing he has that wraps all around him. It's kind of hard to actually plug it in on the back with the wire that plugs in on the same spot in his back. It doesn't quite work the way they wanted it to. And because of the design of the figure, he has very limited articulation. He only has 4 points of articulation if you don't count the little knob on top of his head. Well, not head, on top of his casing that can be turned around, but that doesn't really serve a purpose. That's more just a lid. I always thought as a kid that you were supposed to fill him up with the mutagen ooze, which I'm glad I never had it because you would totally ruin this figure if you did that. There would be like no way to get all that mutagen out. I guess you could fill him up with water, but then you'd ruin the mutagen. So very glad I never did that as a kid. I did fill him with water though, and all the little pieces inside of him. The weird thing about Mutagen Man, in my opinion, is that he's just a really dark, really violent idea for a character. That people always talk about how the 87 Ninja Turtles was not dark and it was goofy and stupid, but there's a lot of crazy concepts they made in that time that they would never get away with making a character do in a new Turtles adaptation. It had sort of a messed up sense of humor, and Mutagen Man is a sign of that. He was a guy who, because of whether you're watching the cartoon or the toy line, he's either a guy who fell into a vat of mutagen in the Technodrome, or he's a guy that Krang was experimenting on. Either way, he gets exposed to mutagen, and he just kind of turns into guts. He's just his organs that are alive. Like his brain has his face, and the rest of him is just basically organs. It's a very violent story. Like it kind of takes Krang from being like a funny villain to just being like a sick guy. So I guess that's why they left it out of the cartoon. They made it just like he's a guy who happened to be in the Technodrome doing work or whatever, and then he slips and falls into the vat of ooze. And his human name was Seymour Guts. I don't have too many specific memories of Mutagen Man. As I said, I forgot I even owned this figure until I got older. But I do just remember filling him up with water. I know when I bought him back in 2006, I actually got him with the gun, the yellow gun that he comes with. But somehow that got lost. I don't know, it fell behind a dresser and I never found it when I moved the dresser. So I don't know what happened. Next is Scumbug. Scumbug's another one I forgot about for a while, but once I saw him again, all the memory of this guy flooded back into my brain, and it's like I never forgot him. Although I was actually just talking about how I don't collect variants, I actually do own both variants of Scumbug. There's one where his boot is painted green, and there's one where it's not painted at all. It's just the same black as his pants. Scumbug is a crazy figure. Like, he is just one of those total gross out figures. You know, they made a lot of those. Like, Mutagen Man is a total gross out figure. Muckman is a total gross out figure. And Scumbug is right up there with them. Just that demented look on his face, the way his eyes are bugging out of his head and they're all bloodshot. Like, he's just a total gross out character and it's awesome. I love it. I know a lot of people seem to think that his midsection here is just a bunch of like blobby fleshiness, like almost like guts, but it's actually not. If you really look at it, you'll see that they're actually mandibles, like extra arms, like little bug arms, folded up, just sculpted onto his belly. He has little pinchers and stuff. So if he moved that, he'd actually just have a regular midsection. They just didn't make them actual arms protruding off his body. They just kind of like sculpted them onto the body. I think the one thing about Scumbug that always stood out that was a little weird to me is he doesn't really have a very clean color scheme. There's just about like one too many colors on him, I think. The purple is good, his skin color, you know, he's the only other one like Baxter who has like human skin tone in there, I believe. And he's got the blue shirt, the black tie and pants. Then he's got this dark green elytron on his back and these bright yellow antennae on his head. And that's already like, that's a lot of weird different colors that don't match. But then I think the one thing that pushes it over the top is he has this red sort of plate on his head. And I feel like that's the one color that kind of just pushes it over the top. It doesn't really match. If the red was the same green as his back, then I think it would work a little bit better. But at the same time, I'm so nostalgic for the color combo of this figure that even though they don't actually quite go together that well, I still love it the way it is and I wouldn't want it any other way. For some reason, I always pictured this guy sounding like Beavis. Like, doesn't he look like he would sound like Beavis? They even gave him a weird little feature where you can sort of shake his jaw. Almost looks like he's laughing like Beavis. But yeah, he was an exterminator, clearly, who, ironically, when he got hit by mutagen, turned into a cockroach because he's an exterminator. He's constantly touching cockroaches. So he's another figure that I owned. In this wave, I owned a lot of figures. I mean, Slash was mine, Mutagen Man was mine, Scumbug was mine, Napoleon was mine, Fugitoid was mine, and some of the other ones were mine. I got a lot of them in this wave. This was the point where it really changed, where me and my brother really had equal amounts of turtle figures. And it wasn't just like my brother got most of them and I got like 2 or 3. Triceraton is awesome. Now, weirdly enough, Triceratons are, as all Turtles fans probably know, a whole race of people. But I didn't know that as a kid because when I was little, I didn't read the Mirage comics. I didn't know that's where they came from. I didn't even know the Mirage comics really existed. I heard like, oh, there was the original comics, and I didn't know that the Archie comics weren't the ones people meant when they said the original comics. I didn't even know the Archie comics were made by Archie. I had no idea. So I thought the Archie comics were just the original comics. I didn't know anything about Triceratons. They eventually did appear in the cartoon show, but weirdly enough, they didn't appear with the figure. They appeared much later than the figure. So by that point, I really wasn't even watching Turtles anymore. So it was news to me in the 2003 series when suddenly the Triceratons were a whole race and they were very important and involved in the story. I didn't know that. So the 2003 series actually kind of opened my eyes to the true story behind Triceraton. As a kid, I thought it was Triceraton, like it was a joke, like, oh, he weighs a ton and he's a Triceratops, so he's Triceraton. And I just thought he was like a random guy. I thought he was just one guy, that was his name. Now that I've gotten older and I've read the original Mirage comics and everything, you know, everyone's talked about it at this point. The 2012 series really went all in on the Triceratons in later seasons. Now I know, obviously, the importance of the Triceratons, the origin of the Triceratons, and, you know, basically everything there is to know about the Triceratons. But back then as a kid, I didn't care. I was just like, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and dinosaurs just mixed. Like, the two coolest things in the universe. The two things that I loved more than anything else. It's weird, actually, I loved this toy. I thought he was really cool. But it's weird that he wasn't, like, my absolute favorite. You'd think he would be, with how much I loved dinosaurs as a kid. As a kid, it was like, in the 80s, there was so much dinosaur stuff. Like, we would just constantly rent dinosaur VHS tapes from the library. They'd all be, like, stop motion. Some would be, like, Will Vinton's work, you know, the claymation father. And, you know, there'd be all these... There were so many movies about dinosaurs, like Baby and The Land Before Time. And it just seemed like all through the 80s into the 90s, up until Jurassic Park, the dinosaur craze for kids was just swelling and swelling. And by the time we got to Jurassic Park, you know, we had the dinosaur Jim Henson show and everything. Like, we had so much dinosaur stuff by that time that Jurassic Park was like, well, here you go, here are real dinosaurs. And it never got cooler than that. Like, that was awesome. That was like the grand finale to like the 80s kid dinosaur obsession. And Triceraton came out right in the early 90s, right at the start of the 90s. Perfect timing. Awesome guy. I love this figure. I love the bright orange. As I've said, I just really love that like bright, bold color scheme they used on these figures in this wave. The almost neon, sometimes actually neon. Like, they just really popped. It was so cool. They kind of toned the colors down a bit as the line went on longer. But these first 1990 figures, like the 1990 figures and some of the 91 figures, just had these awesome colors. And Triceraton looks so cool. I love the way the bright orange contrasts with the pale periwinkle kind of blue. And then he's got those cool teal pants. It's just like, it's such a cool color scheme. He's also got that kind of metallic silver on him. Now, I have a couple of stories involving this figure. The first one that I remember the most is when I got this figure. It was like my brother's birthday, I believe. And for whatever reason, my brother was a little kid. He's awesome now. But when he was a little kid, he was such a little brat, especially at this time when we were collecting turtles. And he threw this big hissy fit for some reason. So my parents took him to Toys R Us and like bought him a ton of turtles. Like, he didn't get what he wanted for his birthday or something. I don't remember what it was. So they bought him a ton. He got like Break Fighting Raph and like a bunch of others. I guess they felt bad because, you know, I had to come with them. And even though it was his birthday, he was being a little brat. And I had to just kind of sit there as my brother got like a million toys and I didn't get anything. So my dad bought me Triceraton. It was like, here you go, you can get that. But then my brother threw an even bigger tantrum because he's like, but I want that one. So he actually was such a big brat that eventually my dad just bought him a copy of Triceraton also. So we had two Triceratons for a while. I think actually we kept both of them probably the whole time we had the figures, which is ironic because I didn't know that he wasn't a standalone character. I didn't know that he was like a species of Triceraton, like a race, an army of Triceratons. So that actually we did properly army build for a bit with that figure without realizing it as kids. But my other memory with Triceraton actually involves Turtles 3, the movie. Yes, the very, very disappointing night that I saw Turtles 3. I saw Turtles 1 and Turtles 2 in the theaters. I loved them. I went nuts. Like, it was great memories seeing those movies in the theaters. And Turtles 3 just got our hopes up so high. I mean, everyone said this before. You've heard the story. Turtles 3 disappointed all of us during Turtle Mania, and to be honest, that movie is kind of what started the downfall of Turtle Mania. The golden age of Turtles really died after the flop of Turtles 3. But we didn't even see Turtles 3 in theaters. I still didn't know anything about it. I was upset we didn't get to see it in theaters. All I heard is that it was about time travel. Aside from that, everything I heard was a lie. There were so many rumors going around. I mean, more people called it Turtles in Time, which was not its name. That was the name of the game. But a big rumor I heard was that they travel to multiple different time periods, sort of like the game Turtles in Time, and specifically that Triceraton was a character in the movie. I remember my brother's friends saying that, like hearing it on the bus and stuff. So going into this movie, I was really expecting to see Triceraton, and that like blew my mind. And again, as a kid, I didn't know that Triceraton was a main character. Like this race was very important to Turtles lore. To me, that was like a very, very random choice for a character. But as a kid, you don't really think about that. You don't really care. You just want to see the obscure characters that you love in more stuff. So you don't even question, like, why would they add such a random character? You're just excited that they added them. And the whole idea that it was time traveling was like, I guess Shredder was time traveling too, and he mutated a dinosaur into a mutant or something. It's what I was expecting. But the movie started, it was very obvious early on that it sucked a lot more than the last two. And they quickly brought in the story, you know how it goes, the magic scepters that transport them back to feudal Japan, and they bring the samurai guys to modern times. You know, there was actually more samurai back in the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles than there even were ninja when you really think about it. There were so many samurai. But yeah, after we were in feudal Japan in the movie for about 20 minutes, I didn't want to admit it, but it was already sinking in that this is it. This is our movie. This is the only time period they're going to exist in. After about 20 minutes of just having human villains and human supporting characters, it was very clear to me too, even though I didn't want to admit it, that no mutant characters were showing up. No other characters from the Turtles canon that I was a fan of were going to show up in this movie. And I was so upset. At the start of this movie, I was so excited. My dad had brought it home on VHS. He bought it like a bootleg or something. I had grabbed my Triceraton figure before the movie, and I was holding that guy the whole movie, hoping to see him show up on the big screen. And all I got was a British guy with a bird. I think there was a guy named Kenshin in there. God, what a horrible movie. So yeah, that's one of my most memorable moments with Triceraton. But aside from that, he's an awesome figure. He's actually one of the coolest villains in this wave, I think. This is the only original character in the normal scale from this wave that I did not own as a kid. All the rest of the ones we've talked about so far, I owned them as a kid. But we didn't have Pizza Face. He wasn't one that I was terribly upset about not having as a kid, though I did think he was cool looking. He was still, a human, and as you've heard in my videos, when I was a little kid, I wanted monsters and animal people and stuff. I didn't care about humans. So I actually don't really have any personal memories of the figure, but I do have a memory involving the figure. But we'll get to that in a second. First, I'm going to talk about the figure itself, because I didn't actually own this thing until 2006. And admittedly, the copy I have is in terrible shape. I remember a guy sold me this and Ground Chuck together for like $5 back then. And they had none of their accessories, and they were just beat up, and the joints were loose, and the paint was all scuffed. At least this guy had a lot of fun with these figures. You can tell he played with these things until there was almost nothing left of them. But this really looks like garbage, this figure now. But the figure itself is awesome. Pizza Face is a very cool figure. He's sort of this crazy, deformed pizza chef who purposely mutated himself in a pizza oven with mutagen to become the most efficient pizza man or something. I don't really know why that didn't turn him into a pizza or into like whatever animal, like cockroach or rat that was crawling around his restaurant that he touched last. It just turned him into like an ugly ogre looking human. But it's a cool figure. It's a cool idea how you can swap his peg leg out and kind of just put in, either his meat cleaver, or you can put in a pizza box on a stick and everything. Like, he was supposed to come with a bunch of pizzas that he could throw also, but I don't have any of those other accessories. Something I learned about much later on that I didn't know about as a kid, because behind the scenes stuff was never known back then, not until the internet came along and became a household thing. But I've learned that the original prototype of the figure, you could actually remove his chef hat, and underneath there, growing out of the crown of his head, was like his brother, I guess. It's like another deformed pizza chef head, smaller one, growing out of the top of his head. And that's just such a crazy, creepy, gross, awesome detail. Again, this is another one of those total gross out figures. He just really seems like something out of an 80s horror film. Like, you can really see how 80s horror movies shaped Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. He would so fit in a bizarre, wacky movie like Killer Clowns from Outer Space or Basket Case or something. I could see this guy being a slasher in a slasher movie series, like a comedy horror film, where he just goes around and hacks up people who, I don't know, give him bad Yelp reviews or something. He already has the slasher weapons. He's cut off one of his own fingers, you can see. Like, this guy is such a perfect slasher monster. And then you could even have a scene at some point later in the movie where he's chasing somebody, they pull his hat off or something, knock him over, and he gets up, and then they see the reveal that, oh wow, his weird Siamese head is growing off of him. It's just clearly inspired by that kind of zany, crazy, gross out 80s horror comedy that was so big at the time. So yeah, he's an awesome design. Now, the one memory I have with Pizza Face is my birthday in 1991, I believe it was, when the next wave was out, Wave 4 with Ground Chuck, Dirtbag, and all of them. I was in Vermont in July, and I got Sergeant Bananas for my birthday. I got Ground Chuck for my birthday. I got someone else too. I don't remember who else. Oh, Worm. I got Worm for my birthday. And I might have even gotten a turtle variant or two. But again, this was my birthday. These were my figures. And we did not yet have Pizza Face at that time. He was the only thing from the set prior that we did not have. He's the only guy from Wave 3 we were missing. And my brother was like certain we were getting Pizza Face. I think he was like reminding my parents constantly, like, get Brendan Pizza Face, get him Pizza Face for his birthday. And they didn't get me Pizza Face because they probably just couldn't find him. He was already an older figure at that point. You know, figures went fast back then. And my brother, again, I am not just trying to make this entire series bringing up embarrassing things my brother did when I was a kid, but he threw the biggest temper tantrum when I did not get Pizza Face. It wasn't even his, it was my birthday, but he got so mad because, you know, he thought of all my figures as his figures. It was like his collection, even though half of them or more were mine. He threw this huge temper tantrum. He's like, I'm not talking for the rest of the trip and everything. He was really mad that we didn't get Pizza Face. To be honest, I didn't care that much. Like I said, Pizza Face was cool, but I wasn't like obsessed with getting Pizza Face. Like, I thought he was one of the lamer characters from the third wave. But there was these two kids who lived next to my grandparents, and I remember we went over to their house, and they just had like a ton of turtle stuff. They had like the pizza launcher, I think, and just a bunch of vehicles and everything. We never had a ton of the vehicles. We had like the basics. We had the blimp and glider. We had the party wagon. We had some of the play sets, the sewer, the Technodrome. We had the Cheapskate 2. But we never had like a ton of them. But they had a ton of stuff, and they had like kind of a gazebo in their yard, and we were hanging out in the gazebo, and they had all their toys out, and they had Pizza Face. And I remember my brother just staring at the Pizza Face toy like the whole time we were there. He couldn't stop staring at it. I wonder, he might have even been thinking about stealing it. I have no idea. But thank God he didn't, because those were cool kids. But yeah, that's my memories with Pizza Face. My memories of Pizza Face revolve around what happened because I did not ever get Pizza Face as a kid. But I have him now, so someday I'd like to replace this one because this one's in horrible shape. Like, look at it, it's disgusting. And I'm aware that in the 2012 series, they actually did make him a mutant pizza. Now time to talk about the Mega Mutants. They never really did much with this idea. They only did these two characters. I feel like it would have been an interesting thing to keep going, like every wave add another Mega Mutant or two, but they never did any more than these two figures. And I never had these as a kid. I do remember seeing them on the back of some packaging. I believe on the back of the packaging, it could have been for the motorcycle that my brother had. I don't remember which figures showed it on the back. I believe vehicles would show it on the back, because these guys are sort of this weird in between. They're kind of vehicles and they're kind of just regular character figures also, just humongous ones. But I do remember seeing them when I was a kid, especially the Needle Nose. I believe I saw Needle Nose in the store one time in Toys R Us, but I didn't get them. Because, you know, these guys were more expensive. My parents would rather buy multiple figures for the same price than paying that price and getting one figure. The way they looked at it is we'd probably enjoy having multiple figures more than just one, even if it's really big, which is probably true. I probably did enjoy having more as a kid. But these guys are actually pretty awesome, and it's kind of a shame that I went most of my life with never owning these guys. I got them only like a year ago. And I mean, I've known about them for much longer, but I found them in a retro toy store by me, which is an awesome place. And I actually got both of these guys for, I think, $20 a pop, which is kind of insane, actually, when you see how much they go for online. They don't go for like the craziest prices ever, but they go for more than that. They're not complete. They're missing some accessories, but still. Yeah, I didn't own them until then. So let's actually talk about them individually now. I'm going to start with the villain, Killer Bee. Killer Bee is awesome. Like, I love this figure. Look at just the look on his face is so it's hilariously awesome. Like, he's so angry. He's like insane, this guy. And that's the crazy thing about it. When you really look at this figure and read his little profile and everything, you realize that Killer Bee was a psychopathic murderer on death row, and he was mutated and turned into, well, a giant killer bee. And now he actually wears his electric chair that he was going to be executed in on his back as a mount for foot soldiers to ride him. And he has a chainsaw, which looks like it's covered in blood. I don't even know. Like, this is insane. And, you know, he has like a prison ball and chain on him normally, but it's like a magic 8-ball, which is kind of funny. And then he had like a sawed-off shotgun. Like, what a violent idea for a toy. This guy is like a serial killer, and he's like insane. Look at him. He's like frothing at the mouth. His eyes are crazy. Like, he just wants to kill. They would never, ever do that in a modern Turtles interpretation. That's what I was saying earlier, that there's just some ideas they had in this original line, just the sense of humor they had that was just so dark that they would never do it now. Can you imagine a little kid buying a toy of a serial killer bee today who was going to be put to death? But on top of that, he's just an awesome sculpt. Like, he just looks so cool. I love how they used the prison stripes. Instead of being black and white, they're yellow and purple, so it matches his bee butt. So it's like the yellow stripes of the bee also can be interpreted as prison stripes, which is a really creative idea. And he's just an awesome sculpt. I mean, you look all around and there's so much detail sculpted in. There's so many, like, he's all busted up and he's got stitches and stuff and just all kinds of crazy things sculpted into this figure. It took me a while to even notice these cool skull designs painted on the base of his wings. Like, it's so highly detailed and there's so much cool little clever stuff going on there that, again, these are figures like Muckman, not quite on that level, but like Muckman, you can just look at these for so long and marvel at the detail. I love the translucent stinger. There's no reason for it to be translucent, but it's awesome that it is. The only thing I'll say is, like Scumbug, I feel like they got a little carried away with the colors here. I would like possibly for the legs to have a bit more uniform color scheme. Like, if they all had the purple and green color scheme, that would be better. The whole like red and blue thing looks kind of weird, especially the red one. It really stands out. I feel like they should have just used more of the green, purple, yellow, and orange that we already see on the character. But at the same time, it does also help the toy look more unique and break up some of the monotony between the pieces. All around, awesome figure. He's honestly one of my favorite villain figures now, and it's a shame I never owned him or really even knew much about him at all until very recently. Next up is Needlenose. He's a hero, although I have no idea why you would make a horrible, blood-sucking, stupid mosquito a hero. If there's any one animal I think every other creature on Earth can agree sucks, no pun intended, it's mosquitoes. But this one is a hero and he fights with the turtles. He's like an ex-military guy who was mutated, you know, Air Force guy. So he kind of imitates the look of like a fighter jet mixed with a bug. He's a very cool sculpt. It's a little weird to get another mosquito in Ninja Turtles, not only another mosquito in Ninja Turtles, but in the exact same wave that we got Screwloose. So they simultaneously released two mosquito characters, which is a bit odd. One's extremely small and one is the largest character in the entire line. not counting the jumbo versions of characters. He also has my hairstyle here. He's got the ring around the dome, the empty nest. I remember when I was young, everyone always told me, oh, you got the thickest, richest, fullest hair. It's gonna last your whole life. And then 25 came around and it all fell out. But, hey, I mean, at least I didn't also mutate into a giant mosquito monster. But, I mean, who am I kidding? I'd actually look cooler if I did. So, nah, it's all a loss. It's kind of weird how the seat on his back is like a giant tongue. I don't know what that's all about. I'm missing some of the accessories for him as well. Like, there's supposed to be a cannon mounted to the front of this seat, so whoever sits on his back can kind of fire at the other characters. I do have his missiles, though, that go on his wrists. He's a very cool figure. He is colossal. He's even much bigger than Killer Bee, especially when you stand him up like this. Again, like Killer Bee, he has a ton of sculpted detail. You can look at this figure for a long time. Well, there you have it. That's probably the longest ramble I've ever done about Ninja Turtles in my entire life. And if you stuck through the whole thing, props to you, man, because that was a hell of a lot of rambling, and you deserve a medal for that. So, now that I've talked about all these guys, I love them so much, let's rank them. It's going to be tough, but let's do it. Alright, I'm immediately just not going to count the Mega Mutants. I'm just going to take them out because I didn't have these as a kid. I only got them much later in my life. And it's kind of unfair to put them with all the other characters because I have strong nostalgia for all the other ones, and I don't have that for the Mega Mutants, even though they are cooler than most of the figures. And also, they're kind of like vehicles, or like, you know, almost play sets. They're not really regular character figures, so I don't think it's fair to compare something that clearly so much work went into in money, rather than just an average, you know, back then, like $5 figure. So, when it comes to the Mega Mutants, let's just say, I like Killer Bee more than I like Needle Nose, but they're both awesome. So now let's go to the ranking. Without a doubt, I don't even have to think about it, my favorite figure in the whole wave is Muckman and Joe Eyeball. Number 2 is so difficult, because there's so many cool figures. But I think I'm going to have to go Slash, because I just really like the way they executed the Slash toy. It's so cool. Number 3 is even more difficult. I feel like part of me wants to say Triceraton, part of me wants to say Scumbug, another part of me wants to say Fillet, and another part of me wants to say Mondo Gecko. And Wingnut and Screwloose, honestly, would be in there too. So, if I was going to pick how much I like the characters, Mondo Gecko would probably go first, but I don't know if I'd say he has the coolest figure of the bunch. I'd probably say Triceraton. Then I would say number 4 is probably Wingnut and Screwloose, honestly. I really like their figures. They're really cool. My opinions here could change any day, but this is what I'm thinking right now. Then I'd say Fillet. He's awesome. I really like that figure. Then I'd say Mondo Gecko. And lastly, I would say Scumbug, only because of the fact that a lot of the accessories he comes with are difficult to use. The wires don't really plug on to the backpack and the gun that well, especially the gun. It really is impossible to get that wire to stay plugged into the gun. So because of that, I think he loses some points. Then at number 8, I would say Napoleon Bonafrog. I just really like the color scheme on that guy, and the design is really cool. I love that like summery surfer kind of vibe he has going on with the neon colors and stuff. It's so 1990. Like, it is so 89 to 91 kind of era. After that, I don't really know between Fugitoid and Mutagen Man. I like both of them. I think they're both cool, but I'm not entirely sure which one I think is cooler. I think Fugitoid just has more options. He has more action features and more accessories and cool things you can do with his accessories. So I think I'm going to go Fugitoid, number 9. And then number 10, put Mutagen Man. But Mutagen Man is still an awesome figure. I'm not saying I dislike him. It's just, there's so many good figures in this line. It's so crowded. Some of them are going to have to go a little lower. After that, I'd say Pizza Face. Again, Pizza Face is awesome, but compared to the other ones, he's definitely the weakest link. And then at the very bottom, I would put Panda Khan. And then at the very bottom, at 12, I would put Panda Khan, because... And then at the very bottom, at 12, I would just throw Panda Khan, because as you can probably tell from watching this video, I'm just not really too much of a fan. So there it is. I actually love all these figures. I hate to pick and choose. I hate to have to rank them, because then it's like, it makes it sound like I don't love Scumbug or Mutagen Man as much as I love Fillet or Mondo Gecko, but it's like I love all these characters, I love all these figures. So it's just so hard to choose. That's the testament to how great this wave was. Like, just so many good figures. You feel like a jerk even having to rank them. That is my ultimate way of putting into perspective how good I think this wave is. I feel like a jerk ranking it. So next time we're going to move into 1991, where we got not as many figures. It got scaled down. We never got this many unique characters ever again. We got more variants of the Turtles over time, but as far as unique characters go, this was the big mother load this time. We had 14, when usually we have about 10. So next time it goes back to 10, but there's still some great figures in there. I don't feel like it has quite the charm that this wave did, but it's still awesome. There's still some great figures in there. It's still iconic Turtles. So next time, let's talk about that. Until then, take care, Shellheads. Do all the liking and subscribing and the sharing and the bell stuff.